Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter 3%, our Patreon supporters, and the University of Rochester. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and I'm joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joytime Killbox.
Howdy, Chad. Good to see you all the way across the ocean.
And I'm on my computer again. It is fixed. I have Wi-Fi working for the moment.
This podcast is worldwide. Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the new Europe. We're all over the place.
Central Europe. But yeah, so this is, if I didn't say it at the top, we take a book, in this case 2 books, break them down bit by bit, talk about them, analyze them, try and have some fun. We are doing DML Eltit's Never Did the Fire and the corresponding translation diary by Daniel Hahn called Catching Fire. So all the fire this week, sort of like the fire that Tommy Pham brought to Jock Peterson's face over the weekend.
Please explain what that reference is for those of us who don't watch baseball or read Google News feeds that have something to do with baseball.
It's maybe my favorite assault story for a variety of reasons. So Tommy Pham, a former player for the St. Louis Cardinals of all things, but also from the San Diego Padres, and now plays for the Reds, was going up against the Giants and Jock Peterson over the weekend. And Tommy Pham's walking with his mental health coach. Literally, his mental health coach is alongside of him as they're doing a exercise called grounding, where you walk with no shoes on so you can feel the earth and cement your spirit to the earth and be calm and mentally prepared for a baseball game. Walks up to Jock Peterson, says, "Hey, you remember that thing from last year?" And Jock Peterson says, "You mean fantasy football?" And Tommy Pham says, "Yep," and slaps him across the face. and then we get 90 press conferences in which, after Tommy Pham's suspended for a few games, but Jock Peterson is here's why he's pissed, because I made all these memes making fun of the Padres. And he's I just sent one. And then Tommy Pham's no, he sent 5. And also the real problem is Mike Trout, because he was the commissioner of the league. And he didn't even he just let the shit go on. He's a terrible commissioner. I can't stop laughing about this story. I think it's the
professional
funniest
athlete was getting teased on fantasy football, and in reality wanted to lash out. This is amazing.
Bam.
Wow.
Bam. Just right up the face. Everyone's slapping everyone these days.
Tommy Pham, is he Vietnamese American?
I thought he was.
There's usually not a lot of. He is. There's not a lot of Vietnamese baseball players in MLB. So.
No, I don't think he's Thai, but let me look. I don't actually know. But he's one of the most. What's that?
Now I want to see the meme. What kind of teasing is going to make you want to walk barefoot when you're with your coach that's helping you with your mental? I'm just and slap the crap out of somebody. It's Will Smith. It all goes back to Will Smith. He is the gateway drug for, if you make fun of somebody now, you are allowed to get smacked in the face without.
You're running a risk.
Yeah,
You're running a risk. It's a good thing. That's why we do this. Here he was born in Las Vegas, so I have no idea.
That's the health issues right there. Can you imagine if you were actually born and raised in Las Vegas? Oh my God, it'd be worse.
He is Vietnamese African American. He is the first person of Vietnamese descent to play in Major League Baseball.
There you go.
Nailed it. Yeah, he's also wonderful because he swears more than anyone else I've ever seen. Yeah. There was an interview with him in ESPN a few years ago when the Cardinals were basically going to screw him over, and he was just unloading just every other word. But that's why, I think that's why we have to do these podcasts always remote. We don't want to do anything in person because you might get slapped. There might be someone from Ohio that happens upon a live recording of this and has, 17 seasons of built up anger. Remember season 14, episode 4? The one that where we made fun of Ohio? Bam!
One of my classes, I went on this rant about Ohio and how really there isn't Florida man is actually just Ohio man. They just don't release Florida has that one law to let them do the press releases. And I'm because really, I don't know. I just went on how terrible Ohio is. Oh, does anybody here from Ohio? One guy raises his hand and was well, he's stop me if I'm wrong. He's no, it's mostly right. And then every creative writing piece that he submitted and every poem he submitted had some title that disparages Ohio.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I remember when I was moving to North Carolina, I wanted to write like a personal essay called "Ignore the Smell, We're Just Being Ohio."
Mm-hmm. Well, you got an extra bag because you're from Michigan, so you guys have. I'm sure you have a hate for each other. Like it's like Texas and Mexico, right? Like there's a very special hate on that border that has to do with neighbors, I guess. With Ohio,
neighbors.
Ohio and Michigan, just bad neighbors.
Probably college football as well.
Like Indiana and Kentucky, they just don't like each other.
Oh yeah. All
right, so that's a whole lot of fire to start off the show.
Lots of fire. So
never did the fire.
Where do you want to start with Diamella's book? Because I know you have some criticisms which I'm curious about, and I'd like to hear like what your take is on the book so far. We're more than halfway through it. We have some sort of sense of like what is going on. This section that we read today, which is for anyone listening, is from page 69 through 90. The first part of it, at least, was like the most like plot driven section that we've had so far. Like it actually like develops a mini vignette, which is my favorite chapter so far. Mainly because there's like constipation issues that are very funny to me. But then the part that's going to get me in trouble is I really like One-Armed Juan. One-Armed Juan is just my favorite moniker right now.
That's the I know like each season we try to find a cool band name. And book, and I think the band name that we're going to get from this book is One-Armed Juan would be a really cool. That's a
One-Armed Juan.
Cool punk band.
Probably One-Armed Juan is probably a really cool drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine. I think One-Armed Juan drums the shit out of those drums.
You're thinking of Def Leppard.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm thinking of Def Leppard. Just perfect. So this section, it does sort of explain that they were in various cells together, that their why things sort of fall apart in one of them at least, and talks a little bit about the child, like where there's the picture of her holding the boy in her arms at the sea, and it's the photo, the only one confirming him the boy. So we get like actually like some sort of like the moment anyway.
The 1 week Katie isn't here, we get all the breadcrumbs for the child. I know she's like been like, there's gonna be something going on with this child. There's the trauma of this child. Like, I can't wait. Oh, it's right here. You missed it.
100% dead. 100% dies. 100% their fault. There's also in this section that we read. So there's that chapter, and then there's one where they go out. Correct. The next chapter they go out for a walk. I don't know what they're doing, but the guy, her companion, is like always hunched over and pathetic and can't really do shit. And you get back to the house, he goes back to bed.
Severely constipated, you can't do shit.
It's really constipated. Like if you don't shit for like 3 days, like and then go for a walk, you're just asking for trouble. To be honest. Not a recommended situation. And then the last chapter of the section, I believe this is back to where she works with that old person, and they like.
This is a man this time though, right? Or is it?
Was it a woman last time? I couldn't remember.
Well, last time it was a woman because it was like again like very descriptive genitals, and I feel like
right.
I think this is a different patient or that she's seeing. Yeah.
And he like jacks her in the face, so her nose is all like half broken shit, and then she goes home. So I guess not a lot happens, but that one chapter has like at least a couple things.
And we get a little bit too of like how the cell falls apart. We're getting more of like the reasoning why the cell isn't working or why, but we're continuing these cycles and like these revolutions of again like broken bodies, things falling apart, loss. I keep getting the feeling too of I feel like she's very purposefully making it where what we're seeing and when we're seeing it can be a little bit confusing because you can't trust your own senses, and I think that goes kind of hand in hand with like the bodies being like everything is failing you, and if this is all you have, this is what you're supposed to trust, and it's failing you. Like everything is failing you. I keep getting that sense from the different vignettes that we have.
And there is in Danny's section, the reference that's like been right there that's always obvious is like the connection between a cell, like a political cell, or the revolutionary cell, and the cells of the body that are falling apart as well.
Yeah, we see those things going in parallel, that falling apart, the physical body's falling apart. Yeah, it's definitely, that's all.
I like that this one clarified that they were in like 3 different cells, because it kept being so confusing that they're talking about one or another and how that like sort of plays out.
There's also with time, because she'll mention something like 1,000 years have passed, and like you just take it as hyperbole, but it like feels like it's stated so factually, and it's always the same amount of time, right? Was it 1,000?
Like 100 years, 1,000 years.
Yeah, there's like this degree of exponential time, like by tens, but it keeps popping up the exact same way as well. Which
that is the first line of this section too. Controlling time and space proves to be essential.
Yeah, like I was kind of like, okay, like I'm noticing this thing with time as well, and we jump, from memories to present, like instantaneously without kind of any triggers or markers for it. So it's just a flat circle, man.
I do love that the cell falls apart too, because she does research and has a plan, and he's like, no, you're wrong. No.
Oh, it's the arrogance that did it.
Yep.
This section too, I think, really does hammer home. Again, bad case not on this one, because the word "kid" being used in the multiple meanings of.
I'm hoping there's a chance. I don't know that it'll happen, because she has a friend visiting in Spain, so I don't know that this will be possible. But we were going to try and record like a 10-minute addendum for the Patreon and for the podcast either this week or next week, in which you talked about that particular line, the adjectives translating the rows of adjectives, and the translating all the thes thing. But we'll see if that actually happens. If not, we can always do it in some future week. Go back to those. But yeah, the kid thing I thought was interesting, because let's jump to that actually. So she says, she's complaining, like he's complaining about his wrist hurting, right?
Yeah, and again, that's coming up. That comes right off of the section about one-armed Juan, which I thought was interesting. Like, you're going to be complaining about a pain in your arm when the person we were talking about before that is completely missing the limb. So, yeah, it's kind of like, boo-hoo.
But yeah, so my wrist hurts, kid, you say, and you move your hand to relax or decompress. I don't know, the joint, it hurts, I say. Is it the cold or the humidity or the betrayal of your bones, or a stupid unavoidable cycle of the wrist? The wrist? Which wrist, kid? What a totally laughable word. They aren't going to transform me, I said, into one of those. It won't happen. No chance. And then we get like the explanation where he called me a kid to destabilize me and thus to diminish an undeniable contribution. It was your ally of the moment who did it. One-armed Juan. I don't know why, but I just love that. It reminds me of like One-Eyed Jacks from Twin Peaks. It's like One-Armed Bandit. Like, it's got such a good resonance. One-armed Juan.
But again, it's like going back to the idea of bodies and our bodies failing us. The part of him that's missing is what he's identified by.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's true too.
It's not Juan. It's like, oh, it's premature ejaculation, Steve. Like, oh, thanks. Like, really appreciate that. I told you that in confidence at our cell meeting. This is why our cell is breaking up, right? Like,
don't call me premature ejaculation.
Yeah, but like one-armed Juan, it's like, thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah. Maybe he has 3 arms though. Maybe it's like a tall, skinny situation. He's got like more than 1 arm. He's got more than 2 arms, so they call him One-Armed Juan. We don't know.
And like on page 76, it returns to it again. Does it hurt? I ask you. Does your wrist hurt, kid? Yes, you answer me. Voice distorted by the breathlessness. It still hurts.
And what's interesting with the kid one is that in Danny's diary this weekend, like page 101, it talks about how the word that's used, muñeca, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but means both wrist and doll. So calling her, like the sort of linguistic play there is that the wrist hurts, and then that it's the same word as like what one-armed one calls her, which is a doll, which is, I think, he's right. I think it doesn't track into English very well in terms of like if you're using doll, hey doll, like it's too 50s gangster movie sort of thing. He says 20s, which might be as well. But kid does sort of emphasize that kind of like dismissiveness and undermining, like, okay, whatever, kid. Which is good. I think that's a good example of like how he had to play with that and make it function within our time rather than just like what the actual words are.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the use of the word kid, because like I'll hear people like say, oh, this kid, or like, and they're talking about somebody who's just a couple years younger than them, as if like they have this superiority of knowledge and experience over somebody because you're like a half a generation away from them. Like, oh, this kid, or kids these days. It's like, you're talking about somebody that's 30 years old. Like, what do you mean kids these days?
I call everyone a kid, though, to be honest. No. Like especially my students, those are just kids.
But it's super dismissive, right? Like you're not being mean, but at the same time, it's very dismissive. It's very disrespectful, and it creates a hierarchy of who has, like, there's a strata who has power over somebody else. By, a kid, you tap them on the top of the head and tell them when to go to bed, and it has that feel to it.
Whatever you say, kid. Whatever you say.
Whatever, kid.
Whatever, kid. It's so dismissive. It's so incredibly dismissive. Yeah. Man. So what do you think of this whole book so far? And what is your critique of her? And I knew from the beginning, this is a book that does not fit the sort of style of writing and craft that you most engage with or lean towards. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to hear like what your take is on it and like your criticism of it. Because I mean, I was could that here too, but so far we've been very much not. But I'm curious to hear what your take is.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, like it'd just be my opinion, which doesn't really matter much because I'm not familiar with her work. I'm not familiar with, but just going off of just one piece of what I'm reading, I think for me, like, I feel like, especially with literary fiction, there's kind of like two camps that people get into, and there's more of like, how are you pleasuring the reader with your work? Are you providing plot of stuff happening? And then there's I'm in love with language, and like you need to appreciate the language and the respect towards words in it. And this one's like very heavy. It's a language driven, like, because again, like really there's not a lot there to hook you in and make you like, you need to sit and want to really read it because it's boring, right? Like it's
right.
I remember I'm more of like the entertain the reader camp.
Right.
That's kind of more where I'm at. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. That just happens to be, I went to delight and entertain, and I'm less interested in how pretty I can make the words or things sound.
Right.
But I remember, what's his name? Is it Ron Spillman? The Tin House started Tin House.
Yeah.
Or one of the co-stars. I remember talking to him about Tin House and their style and like when he's taking literary work, what is he looking for? And he says like, well, I can tell you what I'm not looking for. And we get all the like MFA people, we get all the serious writers. And he's like, I just do not like all this navel gazing. And I was like, navel gazing? Yeah. It's like the character is just standing on the front lawn. They're looking at their feet the whole time and like thinking about things, contemplating about things, the earth, the grass through their toes, grounding. They're very grounding.
They got a mental health coach.
Mental health coach grounding. But no, it's like nobody's doing anything. And it's just this pontification of the world and my place in the world. And he's like screw that shit. Like have something happen, do something, like engage me. And again, this just feels, it's very Pessoa-esque where it's just a lot of navel gazing and thoughts and feelings. And I find it to be tiresome after a while. That's just the camp.
Yeah. I think I build on that a little bit with my criticism, but the other books I've read are like more. I mean, this is pretty experimental, but they're like way more like poetic, like broken, fragmented. Like this is so much more like contained. But the fact is that this is like a purely atmospheric book in so many ways. Like there's that plot,
and I'm judging this on
the kid died.
That's why I'm saying like this is just my dumb opinion because I've read 90 pages ever of her work. Like what the hell do I know? I don't know anything, right? Like,
but like the thing that I'm curious about from someone else's perspective would be like, and we sort of talked about this last week with the Nouveau Roman of like how they create something that is objective and outside, and it's interesting to see how it gets formed and how the atmosphere gets created. And I don't have as much buy-in on this in terms of that bit. Like I feel like it's not repetitive enough in some sense to be stylistically interesting, and it's not unique enough or special enough to really carry like 160 pages of atmosphere.
Yeah, no, because like I see some of like the brushstrokes that I really like, you know, with like we're talking about the body and, you know, like the body politic, things falling apart, you know, rebuilding, falling apart. I really like those cycles, and that's a really cool foundation to build this story off of. But it's just lacking the movement that I was hoping. It just needs like a little bit like there to.
It's weird. I feel like and I'm going to take this in a tangent in a second too, but like if it were more crazy and required more like having to piece things together, try and like solve something, I would be far more engaged with it instead of not having that. Like, what am I trying to figure out here? Instead, it's like, okay.
Yeah, if it was more fragmented.
You eat a little bread. You don't take a shit. You buy some laxatives. Your stomach makes a lot of weird noises. Like it's not. No, I don't know, man. Like that's the problem I have with it, and that I think that Danny's diary, which you can talk about more in a second, is illuminating in terms of the issues that are being faced and how she constructs these like long, windy sentences with the various adjectives. I thought the adjective section of the diary was particularly interesting. But it's like I feel like the thing is like I question whether or not it earns it in the end. Like enough. If it's beautiful enough, if it's like stylistically unique enough, or if it's just like in the middle of that kind of. It's like I used to complain, like I don't watch a lot of movies, and I used to complain that like most movies, like, and this is probably not untrue, but like 80 to 90% of movies are just mediocre. There's only like a few movies that are really great and movies that are really terrible, and both of those are spectacular, but so much is just fine. And this feels like it's into that zone where it's like not her most unique and crazy and outlandish work, or like experimental or boundary pushing or envelope pushing or whatever you want to say, where it is something that like challenges you as to really put together the pieces, but it's not bad. Like it's very well written. It's very well crafted. Sure. It just, there's something missing for me too. And maybe that'll turn. I thought it started to turn this time.
Like sometimes it's like those movies that like, where it's a slow burn and then like you wait till the climax and denouement is like, dude, it's worth it. Just wait. Like trust me, it's building towards it.
Yeah.
Like take page 80, for instance. I just did
there's plays like Carousel, which is like totally fine. And then they sing like the worst song ever and everything about it sucks.
Yeah. Page 80 at the
Anti-Carousel Bias. Okay, page 80.
So again, like if we're in camp language and we're in love with language, we're using up. It's a lean, tight book, and we're using up this much space for like chocolate, for instance, right? You take the chocolate and divide it equitably. We like chocolate a lot. Me more. Its taste, that slow, eager wandering across the gums, across the concave palate. I never bite it, never. Rather, I let it come apart in my mouth until my saliva soaks it up, and I prolong the moment when it slides down my throat. You, meanwhile, take your bit of chocolate fast. You are hungry, and immediately afterwards you take one bite of the biscuits, which crunch under your crashing teeth. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just, that's a lot of unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, it's not pretty enough, and it's not doing enough to deserve the space that it's taking there. It's just kind of like, you just kind of grown a little bit with, like, yes, I know, like, you're savoring the chocolate in different ways, and I see the contrast of it, but, like, you know, wandering across the gums and the concave, like, yeah, like, I work crashing teeth on a biscuit, like, it's, you know.
Yeah, the chocolate concave crunch under crashing teeth is a lot in some ways.
And then, like, skip over
all
just a
that
couple
kind of
pages
alliteration
later,
and like sound.
Yeah, and just a couple pages later at 83, slowly I turn my back and I push you. I push you so that you move onto the most radical extremes of your side. Move over, I say to you, and you do it. And in that way, I'm able to rest my spine in a more human position. You know, it's like that, just like little things of, like, most radical extreme of your side. Like, it's it's like,
yeah.
If we're putting on, like, a really hardcore editor hat, like, I would kind of be underlining that kind of stuff, saying, is there a way we can be a little more succinct and concrete with laying on your side in a way, in an uncomfortable way, rather than the radical extreme.
Yeah, and it's supposed to,
or your spine being in a human.
and I think that, like, there's a.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry everyone, I'm gonna move because my Wi-Fi is iffy here. So if you're watching this, don't get too dizzy.
Let's take something, or even when we're talking about, we want something to happen, we want some action. On page 86, when we get the getting smacked in the face, the broken nose, what we think might be a broken nose, right? In the middle of page 6. So the knee, he lifts his leg and it hits her full in the face. Magnitude that I experience a universal explosive sensation in the bone of my nose. I fall. I struggle up into a sitting position on the bathroom floor. Like, this is where, like, you know, you're having a smack, the spark of the pain, like, getting up to the, and it's told in this kind of way that it keeps you so distant from, and maybe that's very purposeful, and that's the whole point of it. But again, it has, like, this, like, such kind of, like, cold clinical part where there's not, like, it'd be one thing if the language was so
cerebral.
Yeah, like, it'd be one thing if the language was so pretty that, like, I can't help but just be in love with it. But it's kind of, like, in that gray space where it does neither for me, right? Which makes it
the hardest. Yeah. So that's what, going back to the one about the radical extremes, like, if that line was supposed to indicate, like, I push you so that you move to the most radical extremes of your side, not just, like, your body side, not just your side of the bed, but the radical extremes of your position politically or whatever. If that ambiguity is what is supposed to be played with there, like, I don't know that there are enough pieces of that where you get invested as the reader into trying to put that together or see that. And so, like, rather than coming off as poetic, it does come off to me too as being cold and a bit cerebral and a bit like almost like that old thing of, like, using the word you don't need to use just to prove that you can use that word, the 25-cent pretension word.
Sure. Well, no, I know everything
it's a little, it's not really like that, but it's like a little bit.
Well, it's like the note that I always hate that I would get in my writing is when someone says, it sounds like writing. Right? It's like, hey, it sounds like you really wrote this part. Right? It just feels like,
it doesn't feel effortless.
It's lean. Obviously, it's she wants to be lean and mean, and, like, again, like you're saying, with the radical side, like, everything has the, you know, it's like too clever, almost too clever for its own good in a lot of places. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Again,
my favorite.
Go ahead.
I have a question. The name of this title of this episode I picked because I don't know what this means. Our Organicity is just a solitary sentence on page 70, and I was like, what is that? Exactly. What is that? So that's why I chose it as the title, just because I thought that's cool. Our Organicity.
See,
But
maybe
yeah,
it's
so I
like
feel like that too.
maybe it's starting to play with the word city being in there, like with the cells and trying to change
The
politically.
cells are, yeah,
Organicity.
yeah, exactly. That's why I find like Danny's book to be far more engaging in a lot of ways, in that like it makes clear like the struggle of this process, and you see that like I think what it establishes for anyone who is like ever questioning like, well, if something doesn't read greatly, it must always be the translator's fault. Like that sort of old school opinion of like when something doesn't read right, you blame the translator, and when something's spectacular, you credit the author's genius.
Yeah,
It's an old school kind of like way of reviewing things and sort of being dismissive. And this, I think, illustrates that like he's doing a lot of work with the text to get to this point. And even when like the things that think like don't really necessarily sing in here because they're not like they don't feel necessarily like they're on his camp so much as like when he gives the examples, he's working with something that's like, oh, okay, get you. Like that's really like a
yeah. I mean,
dense, but dense in not a juicy way, dense in a like clinical way.
yeah, and like DML is clearly like extremely brilliant, so it'd be very hard to some of these like
Yeah.
paragraphs are like, what the hell did I just read? Like I'm trying to go through what it actually means. It gets even more nonsensical because I'm just yeah, I'm like white belt. This is black belt, so I'm not going to be able to do these moves, right? Like, right on. I'm not ready to break a board with my head just yet, so let's not.
Oh man, what parts of his book did you like this week?
Well, I have a hard time matching up. I just go by the dates that we're reading because my pages are completely different than yours. They're off by like
right.
40 pages or something.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So we went up to March 18th, which I should be reminding you each week, and totally forgot that was the case.
Oh, that's okay. The Spanish word historia means both history and story. There you go. See, little things like that. Like how do you convey that into English? No,
the one I thought.
Go ahead.
The one I thought that was interesting is the part about adjectives, about like using the string of adjectives and where the like one can end up, be it like the example he uses as like wearing a trouser or a jacket, pants, and shoes that are black, or black shoes, but you don't know if the black refers to all three things or one thing. I think that that's pretty interesting as like throwing in like a lot of ambiguity into it. On some level, like my hot radical take is just make it work. Like fuck it, it doesn't really matter that much. Like that's not the thing that people are gonna base a response to a book on necessarily, is whether it's referring to one, two, or three adjectives. So just make it work in English and make it fine. Like don't have to contradict anything, but like retaining some of that ambiguity, I don't know that it's super necessary. This is my hot take of the moment. This is my fire. I'm bringing my fire today.
I mean, it's a fire episode. I wonder too, though, if part of it could be, like if you're in the weeds of translating something, that little minutia it feels good because it's something you can grab onto and you can work with. Versus, am I hitting the entire like arc and tone of this? Okay, am I conveying it? Like that will freaking crush you. Like thinking about that. But getting into little nitty gritty things, that feels really good. I'm doing something, right? Like
solved like one specific.
Yeah, like I can solve this. I can solve this problem. And like for you,
I can get that part of the crossword puzzle.
Yeah, like for you, look at the big picture. It's like, who cares? Like, how about all of this, right? Like,
make all of it work.
Yeah,
give the whole style and voice. But yeah, it is true that like I mean, and he talks about the narrators like being like not unreliable, but the complexity of the narrator writing this, and on top of Diamella being the author, and how that creating that voice that is like the narrator's particular strange voice, all of that does seem overwhelming in the end. So I can see what you're saying of like, if you can solve like, if you can solve for X in a few instances, that's super rewarding.
Again, I don't translate, but I just know in my own work when I edit, a lot of times I'll try to fix like really small, insignificant things, right? Like I want to polish the diamond before I even cut it, right? And because it's I don't know. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with all this because I know I'm gonna screw this up even worse. Oh, but I can fix this line. Like I know this line needs to be honed. Right? So I'm ignoring like there's this giant flesh wound in my work. I'm like, oh, let me just stitch this one thing right there. All right, got it. Like,
I got the perfect adjective now.
Yeah. My arm's falling off. Yeah, but I got that little eyelash out of your eye. You're gonna appreciate that. Right? Like
absolutely.
I know that's the way I work.
It's so funny.
But again, it's like if your entire house is a disaster, you're like, you know what? I'm gonna make the bed. I can do that.
It's like the broken window theory.
Sure.
The windows fix the town. To solve crime. What do you think of like the use of numerous adjectives, like in your writing? Like he mentions in here a couple times, like chooses a number, they sort of build on one another as that becomes the flow of like it's X plus Y plus Z, so on and so forth. And then makes a comment about like, from like school where it's like if a writer's using two adjectives, it's because they haven't found the right one. And there is that school of thought and that very and I get that. I wonder where you stand on this. The other is like the explosiveness of like a Rabelais or a list making sort of Sorrentino side of things, where it's like everything, just maximalist everything, and live in a world of lists and live in a list of. There's a John Barthian sort of like exhaustiveness to what you can say about any given thing. But what are you in your writing? Where do you land?
I'm very minimalist. I usually I focus in on having really, really like tight, detailed nouns, like strong nouns that do all the lifting, and then really powerful verbs. And I can basically eliminate almost all adjectives if I do better nouns and verbs. And I like that, but again, I want something a little more clean, fast, and that gives me that like kind of like explosion. But I love reading maximalist stuff because again, I don't do it, so it's like, oh, cool, I can really enjoy this. Like, I'm not going to critique it because, it's not my thing.
Just add in everything.
Yeah,
I remember that was actually what there was. I forgot we should have said that. I should have said this on our last season. We were doing 2666, but Wells Tower, who is, speaking of Tin House, a subject of controversy of a Tin House writers workshop a few summers ago for a story he wrote. But one time I met him, it was after either Savage Detectives or 2666 had come out, and it came up in conversation. Like Bolaño came up in conversation, and he's like, "Is there anything this fucking guy can leave out of a book?" You remember that line? I mean, like, he does incorporate everything.
Yeah,
those books are fun too.
I think like with Bolaño and for sure with like Rodrigo. Again, I'm not anywhere in that kind of style. So to me, it's like really. I was surprised how much I liked Bolaño, because normally books that are so heralded, you're kind of like, yeah, well, let me see if it's that good. Like you kind of want to not like it because everybody likes it, right? Like
right.
But yeah,
it's like the new Taylor Swift album. You just like press against it from the start because everyone likes it.
It's like everyone's saying top 10.
That's a sacred cow. That's gonna get me slapped. Taylor Swift jokes will get me slapped. Yeah, like fucking Top Gun Maverick. Like, no way, man.
Apparently, that's really good.
Is that like?
I refuse. I'm not going to
accept this.
Curtain jerking.
Everything about that movie right now.
I can't watch this. Yeah.
No, really I want to see a sequel that's 36 years after the original. I also hate Tom Cruise, but he is like litters my timeline right now, and all like because of this fucking movie and everything. He's always there. But there was one amazing article I saw that was an evaluation of Tom Cruise running, which is a really, really fantastic like trope in watching movie stars, because none of them know how to run. They all run like in the weirdest ways, as if they've never ran in their lives. I don't understand it. It's
I will give
baffling.
you one gem on this little rabbit that we're chasing here. Google Steven Seagal running. Steven Seagal.
Okay.
Okay, not right now, obviously, but you can thank me later. Steven Seagal running. There'll be a YouTube compilation. He is a fantastic. He has never. You're right. He's never ran in his life. Steven Seagal running.
It's incredible.
But to bring this back full circle with
Very funny.
celebrities in the book and whatever, I'm just glad we're not talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard and shitting the bed. So, hooray.
We got shitting in the bed. And I did not make the joke intentionally for that very reason. I am so thoroughly pissed about that whole thing though, and I fucking hate Johnny Depp, and I hate the internet, and I hate what's happened as a result of this defamation trial becoming something that's much more dangerous and like insidiously bad. I mean, insidiously just straight up bad for like victims and women and everyone. The whole thing like unnerves me. I've done talked about it way too much. So I'm going to stop right now. I avoided the shit joke for that reason, because I know how this works. we talk about Jock Peterson cutting fingers, shit in the bed, and then 40 minutes gone by, and we have 0 listeners.
Yep. Well, this was the fire episode.
This is the fire episode.
Yeah. So I'm interested. When we get through this book, I'm excited. I want to find something else by Eltit, and I want to check it out to see if I'm completely wrong in my assessment. I mean, with this book, but again, I'm only 90 pages in this. Like I might have a different story next week. I don't know, but
it's weird because this book is so slow to read.
It's just right in that middle spot where, like, to me, if it's about the language and about the poetry and the sound of it, it's just not quite there. And then if it's about the delighting, entertaining the reader, it's definitely not there. So it's kind of like right in between.
Yep, I absolutely agree. Do you have a favorite line from this week though? Because I definitely do.
Go ahead.
It doesn't include one-armed Juan or shit. I promise.
I read 3 passages already. So
okay. My favorite. This is a very Chad line. Oh, numbers and their boasting, their stupid science or their abstract color.
All right. Oh, numbers.
Anytime there's numbers. Oh, numbers.
Awesome.
Do you have any others? So I didn't look, but I assume like next week we go up to page like 110-ish or thereabouts, like 108 probably, and Never Did the Fire, and then Catching Fire probably up to like 130. It'll be posted. The reading schedule will be linked to in the show notes, obviously, as is our Patreon site. If you want to support, if you like what you're hearing, you want to support some fire, some jokes about Ohio, shit, I don't know, whatever, weird metaphors, talk of adjectives, support us. That would be wonderful. We give everyone a shout out at the end of the season. If you support at a certain level, you get a book from my personal library, which is great. And at another level, we would make fun of a book that you really, really want us to make fun of in our most comedic and over the top way. Which I believe we've handed that duty off to Katie though, which is why she's not here. She's
very comfortable roasting a piece of literature. Yeah.
Just burn. Yeah, she's just gonna burn everyone. she's already got the insults lined up. Like there's so many. And then
she should roast my book. I think it'd be very fun to come on and just with me on there and just bash and read lines out of my own work. They're like, what in the world were you thinking with this? Like, seriously, you thought that was a good idea? Like, I would be down for that. Just completely.
Since she's not here, let's assign her that task for next episode.
Give her one story out of the collection and have her just eviscerate it. Like, write a bad review of this, and I'll just sit there the whole time trying not to cry. Just, I deserve that. I'm down. If you're gonna dish out criticism, you should definitely take it. So I'm totally cool with her just ripping me a new butthole. Let's go for it.
That will be super fun.
That'd be
we'll
fun.
do that.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
It would. So if you want to participate in getting books ripped on, you can always support us over there. Like us on the Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, rate, review, share with your friends, get everyone to pay attention. And I don't know, anything you want to plug or rave about?
Maverick 2, you got to go see it. It's amazing. Tom Cruise is in it. Fire.